Today I'm going to show you how to raise your center support bearing. The reason you need to do this is because when you lower these old Volvos, you will begin to notice a vibration every time you accelerate, usually at lower speeds, and especially if you carry a lot of people in your lowered Volvo, you'll especially feel it. So first thing you need to do is jack up your car. I hate working on the floor. I usually work on a lift, but I just jacked it from there and then put the stand on there. Step, and you go into the car. And this is the center support bearing tray. You're going to begin by removing these 4 bolts. And then it's going to fall down. Don't be afraid, it's going to get held up there. Once it's held in place, you're going to remove the center ones and the tray will come off. Once you undo the 4 bolts, it is going to fall down because this is very heavy. Don't be afraid. Then you're going to remove these 2 and the plate will come off. So once you take the tray out, this is what you're going to see. These are the stock bolts that hold the bearing to the tray. If you might have noticed in the previous clip, I already had washers in there. I'm redoing this. I'm going to add more because I still have a little bit of vibration. So the maximum amount of washers you can put is 12 millimeters. Anything more than that and the bearing hits the frame of the car, and that's not what you want. So if your car is extremely low, go with the full 12. If it's not that low, you might have to do this a few times and try and gauge it. I lowered my car maybe 2 to 3 inches and I put about 8 to 9 millimeters and I still had a vibration, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the full 12 and see what happens. Basically what you're going to want to do is just grab your washers, make sure you measure the stacks, and you're just going to place them there and sandwich them in between the bearing and the plate. So it's going to take a bit of dexterity to, hold the bolt and the washers as you put it back in the car. So while you're balancing the washers and the bolt and the plate, you're going to start with the center support bearing, just thread it in, and then you're going to have to push up on the drive shaft as you start the other 4 bolts. It was very difficult to capture that on camera, so it's very self-explanatory. And then I usually tighten down the 4 bolts to the plate first, and then the 2 bolts to the bearing. And once everything's tight, I don't know the exact torque spec, but maybe about like 30 foot-pounds, 30, 40 foot-pounds, nothing crazy. You should be good to go. So like I said, I previously did this, but I only added about maybe 7.5 millimeters worth of washers, and it still vibrated. This time I went to about, I believe it was like 10.5, and it's significantly quieter. I can't even notice it anymore. Other things to note, if you often carry people, that might vary. So if you often carry 2 or 3 people, I'd probably go the full 12 and see how it rides. Make sure you measure the washers with the caliper, because I noticed that just because I had 7 washers on each side didn't mean that they were all the same. I often had to swap them back and forth until I can get them to be close enough. They varied in thickness drastically. And last thing to know is the bolts. You will definitely need to get new bolts. It's going to be a little bit of a trial and error as you thread them in. Make sure you have enough threads to take up the whole bearing. And just for an extra safety measure, make sure you can see the threads popping out the other side, to verify that it's going to be secure. And you also don't want the bolt to be too long, because then you might damage the bearing as you thread it in. But yeah, it's pretty simple. You can take it off and put it on fairly quickly once you do it once or twice. Just make sure you measure it, make sure everything's even, and you should be good to go. For those of you wondering how low my car is, here we go. It's stock springs, just cut. I cut about 2.5, slightly less than 2.5 coils in the front, and I cut exactly 2 coils off the rear. So for this ride height, you need about 10.5 millimeters worth of spacers. Thanks for watching.